This is the Shinysideup podcast. I am here with
James Stewart.
All right, James Stewart is the owner of
Fly Rabbit Logistics.
All right, James, how you doing today, brother?
Doing great. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic myself here, man. So let me ask you, right? How long you've been trucking?
I've been trucking on and off for about 20 years. 2005. I say 20 years, but it's been about 18, 19 years.
Okay.
2005.
And why did you get into trucking? What was your reasoning to get into it?
Being in law enforcement for over 20 years, I needed something a little bit different. It was a time period in my life when me and my wife had met, and I was looking at doing something a little bit different, and being a truck driver was something that always interested me, even as a young child. So ultimately what I did is I went to truck driving school, got my CDL like most people do and have done, went to a large flatbed company, went through their process. I had a trainer that really wasn't the best, and ultimately got out of over-the-road trucking and kind of went to the local sector and worked for a major beer brand and delivered for them for almost 7 years. And then after that, I switched to the competitor and worked for them for quite a few years. And then got back into OTR somewhere around 2015. Did that for a few months, got out of it again, and went back into car sales. I sold cars for a little bit in between a couple times, and did that for about 4 years and said, you know what, it's time to get back into trucking. And about that time period was COVID, and the money was good, everything was good. So I got back into it and been into it since then.
Okay, you say you used to sell cars, yeah?
Yeah, I used to sell cars.
New or used?
Both.
Both. What was, tell us a story about one of your car sales.
You know, everyone was different. I don't really have a good story to give you. My thing was always getting, where we lived at, there was a lot of challenge credit people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really was what I liked doing was helping people get into cars that probably couldn't somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that was one of my specialties, was helping people out, finding ways to get things done. So I don't really have a specific one to really go over, but that's kind of what I dealt with. So every one of them was different, depending on what the challenge was and, what their past was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And okay, so being that you were a trucker on and off for the last 20 years, mm-hmm. How is trucking today different from when it was when you first started out?
Man, that's a good question. Really, I was only in it for a few months when I first got started. Never really got into it to really figure it out. Mm-hmm. Back then, I don't know, things seemed to be a little bit different, meaning that I don't think the roads were as packed 20 years ago as they are now today. And I think you noticed that just in the last 5 years, how much the roads seem to be packed. And also the thing that really wasn't a problem 20 years ago is the roads, the condition of the roads, potholes, everything that's in the middle of the road, especially the highways. They haven't really taken care of the highways like they should have in the last 20 years. So that was really no issue back then. You would drive down the road and the roads would be smooth. In today's world, forget about it. I mean, it doesn't matter where you drive. It's always going to be a bumpy ride, especially in the trucks. And, you're driving these trucks, and you're thinking the suspension that are on these trucks to handle all this weight. Uh-huh. What about the cars? I mean, these cars are running the same roads that we are, and, it's got to be tearing the cars up because it's tearing the trucks up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you first started driving, were you OTR? Or you said you were local?
I was OTR. I was an OTR flatbed, and we pretty much went to the lower 48. I mean, I've been to almost every state in the country in the last 20 years.
What's your favorite state to go to?
Man, that's wild. I actually like California, believe it or not, even though it's not a state that I really want to go to. But California, Nevada, I like running out west. I always have, but that's the place that you don't really want to go to right now because of freight the way it is.
With the freight market and stuff like that.
I love driving my home state of Florida. I love driving in the Midwest, but the only place I don't really care to go to is, up Northeast like everybody. I don't really care for that. I don't really do it, to be honest with you.
Is there a specific reason why you don't like going up to the Northeast?
That's easy. They hate truckers. That's the easy thing. That
As opposed to California?
Yeah, well, California hates truckers too, but but still, you got pretty things to look at in California for the most part. You know,
but how about you going down I-10 for at 55 miles an hour for quite a long time? It's not much to see out that side.
Well, I only drive 60 anyway, so 55 is no big deal to me. So, but to answer your question, man, I don't like to go to places where they don't like truckers and the roads aren't built for trucks. You're going to hop a curb every time you make a turn into to a customer, or there's no parking. They don't plan for parking, and that's everywhere really anymore, but especially the Northeast. They don't have any plans for anything.
Okay. And you so you first started out almost 20 years ago. You started on flatbed.
Mm-hmm.
How is flatbed compared to what you're doing now?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I had about a month and a half in flatbed, and it was probably the worst mistake I ever made, because that was something that was kind of, well, let's put it this way. The company that I worked for, that I got hired by, made it very attractive. The trucks were gorgeous, and I went for the wrong reasons, and honestly, I was a lot younger then. I was in a lot better shape, but flatbed, it's a chore. It's a hard work to do. And the weather, you're dealing with the climate. If it's cold, it's cold. If it's hot, it's hot. And you're out there tarping loads, strapping loads, and it's not easy. I mean, I commend all the guys that are doing that type of work. It's not easy at all, but again, I didn't do it for that long period of time, so I don't know anything really about it now. But today's world, with what we do in dry van, it's pretty easy. You just go to your shipper. Most of them are drop and hook. You drop it and go and get the next one. If it is a live load, for the most part, you might be sitting for a couple hours, but it's pretty quick, pretty easy.
Okay, all right. And now you said, speaking of getting into this industry for the wrong reasons, in the last couple of years, a lot of people who are not truckers specifically, but a lot of opportunists have gotten into our industry and kind of made a mess out of it, so to speak, during the COVID era, excuse me, when freight was paying pretty high. Now, a new dilemma that we have here is that we have a lot of truckers that are coming in straight out of school and are going into these lease programs that a lot of these companies are advertising. They're even I remember a couple of years ago, you used to have 2 years experience. Now it went down to 1 year. And there is one company out there that we're not going to mention their name, but they'll take you in at 4 months experience. And I've been noticing that a lot of newbies, they're coming in thinking that they're going to make a lot of money. Is that a good reason for people to get into trucking?
That's not really a good reason to get into trucking, but I welcome anybody that wants to challenge themselves to get into a new field and all that. But you are right. And the problem is with the COVID years, too many people were signing up to be truck drivers because the money was there. And because of that, that's what drove the prices up, because there was plenty of freight, everything, and it all needed to be moved because of COVID. And there was a lot of people that didn't want to drive, and a lot of people that sat out. So it kind of washed it out a little bit. But at the same time, that's the problem we're having now, is there's too many drivers that are still in it. The overpopulation of drivers, underpopulation of drivers, like the media talks about right now, saying there's not enough truck drivers. We both know that's hogwash. There's Absolutely. Too many drivers. There's too many drivers that are doing this. That's why the prices are going down, because the loads are less. The freight is less because people aren't buying as much as they did, say, 2 years ago. Because 2 years ago, it was overpopulated because what were people doing at home? They were buying stuff through Amazon, FedEx, UPS, all that stuff. And because of that, it drove the prices up because they wanted their products, delivered faster. Well, now it's kind of the opposite. People have kind of slowed down their shopping because the economy has went through the dump and people aren't spending money. Well, when they're not spending money, well, guess what? There's no loads that are going out. With no loads going out, well, you still have all these truckers. I don't know the exact number, but there was several tens of thousands of DOT numbers that were surrendered last year. Within the last few months, actually, in the tens of thousands, and they just surrendered because there's no freight, and that's what's driving the prices down. I think this year, most of the predictions are coming in saying it's going to be second quarter. It might even be third quarter before, things start looking up. But I think it's going to be a very profitable time for truck driving within the next 6 to 8 months. I think that's going to be the time.
Would that be because it's an election season?
It has everything to do with being election season. Everything. They have to, not getting too political, but both sides, they're both to fault for this.
I'll just let you know right now, this is a safe space. Yeah. You can be political as much as you want. This is a safe space here.
But it doesn't matter which side it is. Every time election cycle comes around, gas prices go down, which means diesel prices go down. And that's going to happen again, and you can already see it. They're already down. I looked this morning, and diesel's down another 10 cents a gallon, which, honestly, it doesn't affect us being the lease drivers that we are because we have a nice fuel surcharge. So, honestly, when diesel prices are up, it benefits us more than it does anybody. I made a lot of money last year just on the surcharge. I mean, and that's just the facts of the way things are. But with the diesel prices going down, it's actually better for us because I think the economy will pick back up, especially during the election year. I think, in the next 6, 8 months, I think people are going to start buying stuff a little bit more and coming out of their savings. And then again, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be bankrupt because they've charged up their credit cards or whatever that situation. I know I'm rambling, but we're going on and on, but it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. It all makes sense.
You've been at Swift for how long now?
Let's see, January of 22 was when I actually started at Swift, but me being a dummy the way I am, I've left twice and came back both times. And been here since 2022, January.
In 2022. So you were here previously before then?
Yes. No. I've left twice since January of 2022. Oh, that's what makes me a silly man.
Oh, okay.
The grass is always greener on the other side. You've ever heard that before?
I've heard it. Listen, yeah. I used to work at Warner. That's where that was the second company I ever worked for. Mm-hmm. And I used to hear it for years because I was over there for plenty of years. Everybody would quit because they don't like the current situation that they're in. And there was always this one person, I forgot what their name was, but he always said the same phrase. Well, don't think that the grass is always greener on the other side. And lo and behold, within a few weeks or a few months, those same drivers are right back on the same dedicated account that we were all on. So
that's exactly the story with me. Mm-hmm. I left and came back both times just because it's like I told you when we were off the air. I made a lot of money with Swift, and why go back? I mean, why not go back?
Mm-hmm. So the couple of times that you did leave, were you company or were you leasing at the
time? I've only leased. I've never been a company driver with any of the big companies.
Okay. So kind of truck you had the first time?
First 2 times, I had, first time I had a 22 Volvo, second time was a 23 Volvo. And this time around, I went with the 23 Kenworth. I wish I would have went back to the Volvo, to be honest with you. Other than the Kenworth, it's a nice truck. It's good fuel mileage, but I just had better luck with the Volvo.
Why you like the Volvo so much?
It's a smooth ride. It rides like a Mercedes. I mean, it's European. Even though they're built in America, it's still a European truck. And the ride to me is just so much better than what the Kenworth is. The transmission shifts smooth like a car. The Kenworth has a little bit of a sloppy shift with it. That's really the whole reason. It's just a more comfortable truck to drive.
I got you. So you got one of those new fancy Kenworths with the digital dash and all that, all the bells and whistles on it. Yeah. Yeah,
it's nice. Mm-hmm. It's a nice thing to have that. But believe it or not, it's all toys. You know what I mean? It's just a truck with toys. Back to the Volvo. I mean, there was more gauges on that Volvo that's on this Kenworth, that I really liked.
Okay, so the first time that you got into leasing at Swift, how did that come about? Like, what was your thinking? What was the thoughts in your head as opposed to leasing at a different company like Prime or JB Hunt or Snyder,
Right.
as opposed to, or one of those
So
Eastern
you want
European
to know how I decided to come to Swift, is what you're saying.
Why was
Okay. So to back up a little bit, I started out at DART. That was my first experience at leasing this time around. And when I was at DART, the whole reason I went to DART was another YouTuber, Trucker Todd. I'm going to give him a little bit of a shout out.
Shout out to Trucker Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love watching him.
And he's the one that convinced me to go to DART. And quite frankly, I was in the process of going to Prime. And I ended up calling Todd at the last minute.
I almost went to Prime myself as well, too.
I called him at the last minute and I said, hey, give me the rundown on DART. And he did. He called me right back within 6 hours. And we had a long talk. We talked for an hour and a half the first time I talked to him. Didn't even know the guy. And he gave me all the ups and downs about DART, and it just made more sense. And called the recruiter, and I told the recruiter my situation, that I was, on Monday. This was Tuesday of the previous week. On Monday, I'm going to Prime. If you can get me approved to go to DART, then I'll come to DART. And she got to work on it and got me approved in 2 days. And I went to DART and worked there for about 3 months. And the only reason that I left DART was I had a truck that had issues and problems, and it was, basically bankrupting me. I liked DART. DART's a great company, but I requested to get a different truck. Mm-hmm. And this was the time period trucks were hard to come by and all that good stuff. And they just didn't have anything. So I kept in contact with Todd, and we talked several times. And I said, hey, where should I go to? He said, go to Swift. Me, just like everybody. Nah, I'm not going to no Swift. What are you talking about? I see all these pictures and these memes and everything on the computer. I said, I'm not going to Swift. He said, James, I'm telling you, you need to look at Swift. They've got a very attractive lease program. And I called Swift Recruiting and called the person that he requested, and she does the videos on Swift's YouTube page all the time, and it's Michelle Cantrell. Another shout out to Michelle.
Shout out to Michelle.
I called Michelle, talked to her. We talked for at least a half hour about the lease program. She gave me all the pluses and advantages and all that. And that's kind of how I ended up at Swift. And my whole thing when I came to Swift is I told Michelle, I said, I got to have a Volvo. I said, I don't care anything else. Just give me the Volvo, because what research I had done, that was the truck that I decided to go to. So that's what happened. And when we called to call me back, she says, I got you a brand new Volvo. And I said, what? Yeah, I got you a brand new Volvo. It's ready to go. And you just got to go to Phoenix to get it. And that's how it all ended up.
Mm-hmm. And you were, straight out the gate, you were just doing OTR?
I did OTR straight out the gate.
Okay. And how was that in the beginning?
Actually, I started off out of the gate pretty good. I started making money immediately. I just figured it out. I don't know how I did, but I was just lucky. Figured it out. Freight was still good at that time. Didn't really have any issues. I kept moving. And ultimately, a position came open with a dedicated route, which was home goods at the time. I started doing that, and that account really made me a lot of money, and it kind of kept me in Florida and Georgia for the most part. And I would go home at least once a week, maybe sometimes even twice a week, and do a 10-hour or a 34 or whatever, that I needed to. Mm-hmm. And I still, made more money than what I did as OTR doing that.
But then you ended up leaving.
Well, I had to, because the dedicated account kind of went away. That's about the time period the end of 22, where freight started slowing down, and they just didn't have the freight, and I had to go back to OTR. So I went back to OTR.
And then you left after you did OTR for a little bit?
Yeah, I left right after I did OTR for a little bit. And like I said, then when I came back, that's when I got on this Target account this time.
Did you go to a different company at that time, or were you just sitting at home?
I did. I went to both times I left, I went to two separate companies. The first company was a total washout. It was a mistake. Should have never did it. I'm not going to mention their name, but it's a big company. Worst thing I ever did. Lost my rear end on that deal. Came back to Swift, worked for another 6 months at Swift, and had some issues. My personality, the way it is, if I'm not moving, then just like everybody, I'm not making any money, and I just thought I'd try it again somewhere else, and I did. I went to another company. I love the company that I went to, and I'll give them a shout out. It's Christian Transportation.
Shout out to Christian.
Yeah, loved them. The only problem was the way their lease program is set up. It's set up on a mileage basis. It's 43 cents a mile, and honestly, you drive 3,000 miles, then your bring home isn't going to be what you think it is because of the truck payments. Truck payment's going to be $1,400 a week.
I hear you say 43 cents a mile.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not on the sliding scale. This is just
43 cents a mile. And if you don't drive any miles that week, well, guess what? You don't have a truck payment.
Oh, that's how they had it set up. How about what was the fueling like?
Fueling was a little bit different. Their fueling was actually pretty good. They had discounts, very high discounts, and I had no issues with their fueling. We went straight by fuel book, and that's how we fueled. And anywhere between $1 and $1.25 a gallon was saving. So I really did good on their fuel. I didn't have any issues with that. The only issue that I had was just the truck payment was too high. If it would have been a truck payment that was a straight truck payment like it is here, then I would have made a lot of money there. Because it was 10 cents more a mile there. That was what attracted to me.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you. And then you came back to Swift.
Did the exact same thing, went back to OTR.
And and then this is the time that you got that Kenworth.
Yeah, I got the Kenworth immediately when I came back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you went back to OTR again?
Went back to OTR and did that for, I guess, the end of November. Right before Thanksgiving is when I went to the Target dedicated account. So I did
believe
OTR.
Around that time is when I did see your videos on YouTube. Yeah. What's your YouTube channel? Let me go ahead and shout that out right now. I was supposed to have done it in the beginning. I told myself to do it in the beginning.
It's all good.
I think I did when we shouted out your company name because it's the same as your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, it's Trucking with the Fly Rabbit is what it is.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
And okay, so back again. This time around, why'd you come back?
Money. I knew I could make money here. I know Swift system. And, I try to mentor. I mentor students, but I also try to mentor just, regular people that come into the system. My driver leader, he says, hey, call this guy. He needs help. Call this guy. He needs help. He needs to know how to fuel right. He needs to know how to do this. So I try to help out everybody that I can when they come in, and I try to give them, I don't want to call it a cheat code, but I try to tell them, this is how I do things. This is how I do this. This is how fast I drive. This is when I fuel. This is where I fuel. This is how much I fuel. All those things make a difference to you making money and being successful. You got to know the ins and outs of how you do that.
Okay. Now, since we're still on the leasing thing, and we're gonna get a little bit more deeper into what you do do at Swift leasing. Question I have for you is. To piggyback off of earlier when I was talking about people getting into leasing and doing stuff, especially at 4 months experience, do you think at this current time with how everything is going, should a brand new person with 4 to 9 months of experience, should they be leasing a truck?
That's a tough question. And honestly, I don't really have a good answer to give you. The only thing that I can tell you in this market, the way it is, you should be prepared for the worst, the best, and all in between. And the reason I say that is because you don't know where the market's going to go tomorrow. We know where it is today, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And the other thing is, to be successful, there's other things to think about too. A single guy with no bills, he can come in and work and make a couple $100 or $1,000 a week and be happy. Mm-hmm. A married guy that has bills, a family, he's probably not going to make it. And I'm talking about as a company driver, not a lease driver, as a company driver, because you got to start off somewhere. And you start off as a company driver. As a lease driver, for somebody coming in that's maybe got experience, if they know the system and they get with the right person and figure out how Swift's system is, because there's a lot of things that go to it that are completely different. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't do too well going to the other companies, because I didn't know their system and I didn't take the time to figure it out. I went on and pulled the parachute and came back. So every company you go to, you got to know when their cutoff is for their pay. So you know how to fuel, when to fuel, and that makes a big difference because your number one expense is the fuel.
Would you say it would... even if you're brand new to trucking and the leasing side of it entices you a bit, would it be fair to say that someone who only has a couple months of experience, who hasn't been through the 4 seasons yet, should they be leasing a truck?
Well, again, I'm going to use myself as an example. Even though I have 20 years of experience, when I got back into it in 21, when I started at Dart, honestly, I didn't have any experience other than just driving a truck. I really didn't have any experience in lease. Should I have done a lease? Probably not. But at the same token, we all have to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Sometimes putting the training wheels on and just jumping right into it, jumping into the pool, is the way to go. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but I think the best thing to do is jump in, figure it out. Just understand you're going to have some times that might be a little bit tougher than others until you figure it out. Give it 30, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. Once you figure it out, you're golden. You just got to get through that little period, however long it takes you to do it. Me, I was a little bit fortunate. I figured it out pretty quickly within a couple of weeks. Now, again, there's been some weeks in the middle that have maybe not have been great. But, for the most part, I've stayed above where I need to be and been profitable the whole time that I've been doing it. I was a fortunate one that caught on quick.
All right. Okay, so now you're at Swift, you're leasing, and you're also training as well. How is the training system at Swift?
Training system at Swift is really good. It's better than most places. I'm going to use Prime as an example. If you're a person at Prime that trains, the driver has to pay the student. Here, it's not that way. Swift pays the student, and you get their miles that they drive. Is how that works. So it can be very, very lucrative to drive with a student as long as you get a student that that helps you out and knows what the purpose that they're there for. Good example is I had a student one time that was going to come aboard my truck, but he didn't because he didn't want to drive any more than 6 to 8 hours a day. And I was like, why? He's like, I just don't want to drive that much. I'm like, well, if you drive 6 to 8 hours a day, it's going to be hard for me to do in 4 weeks to get you to the period where you need to be at the 160 hours to graduate. He's like, well, I don't want you to make all that money. That was his thing.
And you know what? Thinking about that as well too, like that type of mindset.
He had no business being here.
Right. It's more like he set himself up for failure. Now, I'm not saying that you have to drive 10 hours, 11 hours every single day.
Not me.
Some of us can do it. Others can't. But with just setting up your mindset like that, and you haven't even been through training yet. You haven't even driven a truck by yourself yet. You don't even know how it is out there on the road when it comes to dealing with the shippers and the receivers, truck stops and all this stuff, and you already have it in your mind that you're only going to drive 6 to 8 hours a day. How much money you think you're going to expect to make?
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why, like that guy, for instance, okay, he asked me how many hours. And I told him, I said, buddy, you're going to pretty much be running your clock out on your second and third day. He's like, what? That's kind of what brought that up. He's like, why? I said, because you need that. This person that comes aboard, it's a quick process. 4 weeks goes by very quick. They need to be doing everything that they possibly can throughout this 4 weeks. And that's why I put them to the fire immediately. First day, they have their freedom. They sit over in the seat and they watch me. That's what I want them to do. I want them just to watch and observe, ask questions, get to know each other. Second day, they're riding their clock out as much as they can. And again, if they can't drive, then I'm going to kind of limit that a little bit, and we're going to work on it. But if somebody knows how to,
you just want to see how far
I want to see how far they can make it, how their endurance is, right? Whether they can drive nights, days. I want to see what they can do. I want to see what their potential is, and I'm going to tell them your potential is what's going to make or break you for when you're on your own. Because if you can't drive 11 hours, guess what? You might not make it in this business because there are some times that you might have to drive 11 hours.
We got appointments that we got to get to. There, you got to be there to pick up. Some places you got to be there on the dot. You can't be a minute late. I know a lot of Walmarts are like that. 15 minutes late, they'll tell you come back tomorrow.
I had another driver.
Whether or not they have the space or not to take you.
Right. I have another driver that had to take a shower every single day. Every single day. And I said, that's impossible. I said, are there chances where we can take a shower every day? Yes. But sometimes, the job calls and says, hey, we got to get this to the shipper. If we're tight on schedule, it has to go. But you will get a shower. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to make you not get a shower. And they need a shower every day, then we'll figure it out somehow or another. But it does put a damper on training sometimes.
Okay. So, be real with me.
Yeah.
You got into training for the money, or did you want to help people? Was it a mix of both?
Honestly, it's a mix of both. I was a trainer in law enforcement too, and I really enjoyed new people coming in to the field, and that's going for law enforcement and, driving a truck. But, everybody's in it for the money. If somebody tells you you're not in it for the money, then they're lying to you. It's always about the money, period. Always about the money. You wouldn't do it if it wasn't for the money.
Well, that's true.
That's true. Why we truck drive.
I know there are a lot of trainers who their sole purpose is only to get somebody on their truck so they can maximize their profit. It's not necessarily teaching the students how to properly use the truck, teach them how to back, how to use the software, teach them the in and out and the little small things, which I think it's a problem in our industry, is that trainees are just being rotated in and out, and as a result of that, we find out there's a lot of people who just quit. So we'll have a lot of people who hold or maintain the CDL. This might be the one and only time they ever go do anything, and they never make it past training.
Well, I'll give you a good example of that, and just to kind of tell you how my personality is. So I had a student, the last student that I had before I have now. He was awesome. We had a great time together. We have a lot in common. He drives great. One problem, had an issue with backing up. So my thing was, I had him for 4 weeks. I tried everything that I possibly could. I gave him every little thing that I could to show him how to back up, the secrets that I had. Just never would get it. He would always do the opposite. So my thinking was, okay, so what do I do with this guy? Do I pass him, or do I get him with somebody else, or, do I fail him? I didn't want to fail him because he's good at everything else he does. I didn't really want to keep working with him because whatever it was that I was doing wasn't matching up. So what I did is I brought him back to the terminal, told the driver qualification people that, he's got issues with backing. Is there somebody we can put him with? Maybe go out with them for a week. So I extended his time. And I said, I don't think going out with me is going to help him. So at that point, it makes it to where it's not about the money. It's about him.
Right.
I wanted to make sure he got the help that he did. So that's what we did. Brought him back to the terminal. He went with a backing person, and within 5 hours, he was good. He was ready to go. So whatever it was that the other person did wasn't what I was doing. So sometimes it's not always a perfect match.
Right.
I'm not perfect by any means. I've tried to do what I can. So whatever the deficit was that I had that he wasn't getting, he got from somebody else. They passed him, and now he's on his own.
Okay.
He didn't have to go a whole nother week.
Now, what's the worst student you ever had on your truck?
Don't ask that question. I had a guy.
We got to get the good with the bad, man.
I had a guy that, dude, I love this guy. He was awesome. There was nothing wrong with him as a person, but as a driver, he was hitting everything. He ran over a mailbox that we had to work with, ran over curves. We popped a tire. He had a special diet that he had to have. He starved himself for 3 days because I had no idea that he wasn't eating. He didn't eat meat, which that as a truck driver, it's going to be hard to do, to go anywhere where you're not going to have meat as one of your options. He had an option of maybe 4 things that he liked to eat. And in order to get those 4 things, you had to go to special places to get it. So I had to go out of my way to find these special places to get it, which I did once I found out. But after a week of him being with me, I just saw that it was going nowhere, and he was frustrated. I was getting a little frustrated. I called the driver recruitment people, and I said, hey, I'm going to bring the guy back to the terminal. It was a weekend. you might want to put him with somebody else. And not only that, he was from another country too, so there was a little bit of a language barrier. Our personalities, if we would have met each other and as a friend or something, it would have been a different. But as a business standpoint, it didn't make sense for me to continue with this guy because I couldn't communicate with him. He didn't understand me. The special diet and just the differences between the two of us, it just didn't work. So what ultimately happened is he never came back to the company. He just quit on his own. Okay. It's unfortunate, but,
Now, before we continue with your journey as a trainer, you mentioned something that I would like to get into is foreign drivers.
Okay.
Or drivers from out that come in from different countries.
Right.
Now, it's been a hot issue in the trucking community that the reason why we have a lot of foreign drivers is because a lot of these companies like to take advantage of the fact that these are individuals who don't know the system, so they pay them different and treat them different as well too. Do you think that these foreign drivers are being taken advantage of?
That's funny that you asked that because I don't think it's the company that took advantage of this guy. And believe it or not, this guy was a Top Gun student too. And if anybody knows what the Top Gun student is, that's Swift's best drivers. Mm-hmm. So he must have impressed somebody to get that Top Gun student.
Absolutely.
But I go back because he went to school somewhere else. He didn't go through Swift school. He went to school somewhere else and got the Top Gun once he got here. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand how all that works out. But anyways, he went to another school. And I don't think the other school really taught him anything. He had never backed a truck up before, which tells me there's something wrong with that school.
So he did training, got his CDL,
and
never did any backing.
Never did any backing. First time he ever did a back was with me.
You would think that maybe he never went for it either.
I don't know.
Or even got into a truck.
Maybe. It's possible.
So
because
he could have probably been taken advantage at that point.
He could have been. And, like I said, he told me straight up that when he got in the truck with me, that was the first time that he'd ever got into a truck and backed it up.
So how did he even get his license?
Good question. Good question. That's the Twilight Zone questions right there, buddy. Have no idea. That's a mystery to me. And again, when a student comes to me, and this is my complaint every time I get a student that's bad like this. I'm not here to train you how to drive. You should know how to drive and do some basic fundamentals. Mm-hmm. I'm not here. I'm here to teach you how to do Swift system, how to watch your clock, use the zoner system, and basic stuff. You should know how to somewhat back. I can help you with backing, but you still should have some kind of fundamental of what's going on.
Right.
You shouldn't be a fresh driver that's never driven a truck. Like, he had never driven a truck before. He'd never driven a truck on the road before. How did you get your CDL? How did you pass the test?
Do you think that that our government is lacking when it comes to...
Oh, there's no doubt, buddy.
Those aspects.
Buddy, I go back 20 years ago when I got my CDL. Should I gotten into a truck after I got out of training or the CDL training? Absolutely not. They didn't teach me nothing. I learned stuff from my first trainer. It's not hard driving a truck. Mm-hmm. It's like driving a car. You just got to realize you got a long trailer that's behind you.
Right.
You can get away with that. But when it comes to backing, guess what? It's not easy. It takes a while. And with that flatbed company that we go back to that I worked with, they had a special flatbed that you can raise the wheels up in the middle of the, it's not the middle, but kind of towards the end, and it makes, instead of it being a 48-foot trailer, it makes it like a 40-foot trailer, which makes it easier to turn.
Is it like a spread axle?
Spread axle, okay. Exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I got
you. But it made it easier, and I kind of winged it, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Should I have been in a truck driving? Probably not with the training that I got. Mm-hmm. But again, I went to one of those little fly-by-night schools, and honestly, they're not even in business anymore, but I went through one of those little fly-by-night schools just to get the CDL and get through it, and that's what I did.
Okay. Now, my final question in regards to that, before we get back into your training thing, should the CDL test be taken in only English, or should it be available in multiple languages?
Well, it should only be in English, in my opinion. And the reason is because our street signs that we have, they're in English. If you have other languages, then they need to have street signs with other languages, which they don't. You don't remember this, but back in the 80s.
Well, I wouldn't remember because I didn't exist.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. But back in the 80s, there was a lot of cities, a lot of major cities that started, doing signs in kilometers rather than miles. And they converted a lot of stuff. They wanted the United States to convert over to the metric system. Well, guess what? It never worked. Just like with the foreign languages, It's not going to work. Maybe in future it might work, but there's just not a need for it right now. They need to learn stuff in English for now. That's what works.
Right. Got you. All right, cool. So you're training. You've had a couple of trainees under your belt already. So what is it that you're doing now?
What do you mean?
Are you still OTR?
Oh, no, I'm on the target dedicated that we talked about earlier. I've been doing that since right before Thanksgiving.
And how is that for you?
Actually,
they keep you very consistent with the freight?
Absolutely.
Keep you moving?
Absolutely. It's actually a very good account to train with because when a student is with me, they're going to get their backing, multiply it by 4 compared to what an OTR guy does because we're backing into docks, 3 or 4 times a day. So that's helping out a whole lot with that portion. Sometimes, going to use an example, going to one of the big warehouses or something, you might be able to get 1 or 2, maybe 3 backs, and then you're kind of pushing it because they get busy and you can't really just stay there and continue backing. So with this, if I need to practice, I've got a target store we can, back into several times if we want to, 5, 10, whatever. But we don't really need to because we're doing that 3 or 4 times a day.
Now, are you teaching them by the book on how to back in, or do you just play on their strengths?
There is no book, buddy. You just do what you do. That's what I do.
We know a lot of these mega companies, Swift included, and they have this guide on how you should be backing in. But to be honest, I feel like whoever wrote those things have never been in a truck before. It doesn't even know how a truck really operates in reverse. Well,
let me tell you a funny thing about that. Not that I'm talking bad about Swift, because I'm not. I have not yet seen that book. So I'm teaching my way, and that's the only way that I know, and that's the way that's going to make people successful. I'm not saying that whatever their quotation book is, I have not seen it, but yeah.
Okay, I got you. All right, man. We're just about done here. Yeah. So before I let you go, what advice would you give to a young trucker that's coming into this industry, or maybe just a couple years in? What advice would you give to any trucker with how things are going at this moment in time right now?
The only thing really is just to be patient. Keep your eyes open. Be aware of everything. And I'm not talking about just trucking. I'm talking about your surroundings. There are some evil stuff that's out here. I've not experienced it, but other people have, especially for the females. But just getting into the business, just be aware of, what's going on with the market. Keep up with the news. Know what's going on. Try to find some YouTubers that, do news. Keep up with, everything that you possibly can. Keep up with the market. And when you get to the section to where you're ready to switch over to the lease, make sure you do all your research with all the companies. And I'm not saying Swift is the perfect company, but there might be another company out there that might interest you a little bit better.
Absolutely.
But keep your mind open and make sure you do plenty of research. I research. I still research to this day with different things. And that's one of my problems of why I left and came back, because my research was flawed. That's why I'm saying make sure you talk to people. Talk to people with that company. Talk to people with this company. You got to find out what your groove is. Just be prepared that there will be some hard times and with some very good times. Most of the time when the good times are good, they're really good. To me, I haven't really experienced a whole lot of hard times. I mean, there's been a week here or there, but nothing that's been consecutive. But again, you got to be a tiger. You got to be able to make a phone call, talk to a planner, talk to your driver leader. You got to tell them that you're here to work. You're not here to sit around and just not do nothing. And if that's what you're wanting to be and you just want to come in and just wait and let them, give you what they want to give you, then you're not going to be successful. You gotta stay on top of stuff. You gotta call. You know that because I've told that to you in the past.
Definitely.
You got to get on the phone, call these people. Don't be shy. Tell them who you are. Make sure they know who you are. That's another thing that's important. Maybe they have a favor for you. Hey, can you run this little 100-mile load down the road, and I'll take care of you on the backside. Those things are always remembered, and they put notes in the computers when stuff like that's done. That's one of the reasons why I've been successful. I've taken, not so good loads that really didn't benefit me. But in the long run, I got benefited on the other side, or maybe before or something. Just be prepared to do things that are uncomfortable to you. Like I've told you, get into training. You don't really want to, but the money's there. The miles are there. This time period, you need to think about things that make you a little bit uncomfortable. When the times change, then you can do away with it and go back to slow
solid advice. Yeah.
Absolutely. You got to think of things that are uncomfortable. Maybe you're not comfortable with that. Change stuff.
Absolutely, man. James, I thank you so much for having this interview with me today. One more time, go ahead and shout out your YouTube channel again.
Trucking with the Fly Rabbit.
Absolutely, man. Take a look at his videos. They're pretty awesome. It's very informative. And again, thank you all for listening to the Shiny Side Up, episode 1.
Good, number 1
of many. Yeah. Everybody take care, keep the shiny side up, and the rubber on the road.
Thank you.